Welcome to our program that we're very pleased to host with the Afghanistan Policy Lab at the School of Public and International Affairs at Princeton University. After the fall of the Taliban in 2001, Afghanistan made great strides in promoting women's rights and girls' access to education. And when the Taliban took over last August, they promised not to go back to their previous gender policies. However, schooling for girls from grades 7 to 12 remain closed. Our panelists today will address the latest issues on women's rights in the country and how best the UN can leverage its authority to address the degradation of women's rights in Afghanistan. Our panel is moderated by Ambassador Adela, who has twice been our guest in the past. We were delighted to hear from her a few years ago about the progress made in Afghanistan, but unfortunately, that progress has not been maintained. Ambassador Raz is the director of the Afghanistan Policy Lab that has just been created at Princeton. She previously served as Afghanistan's last ambassador to the United States. And prior to that post, she served as the United Nations Permanent Representative from Afghanistan and as the Afghani Deputy Foreign Minister for Economic Cooperation. Our distinguished panelists, who will be formally introduced by Ambassador Raz, are Ambassador Trine Heimerback, Deputy Permanent Representative of Norway to the United Nations, and resident fellows of the Afghanistan Policy Lab, Naheed, Farid, Storai, Tapesh, and Gran Hiwat. So with that, a very warm welcome to all of you, and Ambassador Raz, I'll hand the proceedings over to you now.
Thank you, and it's a great pleasure to be co-hosting with you today's panel on girls' education and the situation of women in Afghanistan. Let me thank President Abed Qureshi and Executive Vice President and Treasurer, Mr. Robin, for being with us along your board members as the participants to the panel. On behalf of the UN Association of New York and the Afghanistan Policy Lab at School of Public and International Affairs of Princeton University, it is my honor to welcome our distinguished panelists to the discussion today. I am grateful for their generosity with time and, of course, their availability. Afghanistan for sure was an important topic in the international arena for more than 2 decades, sometimes with the challenges of the country that had faced, and sometimes, of course, with the progress that Afghanistan had made and experienced. Unfortunately, post August 15, Afghanistan is entering a new chapter of greater challenges. The exacerbating humanitarian crisis, as the UN calls it, a humanitarian catastrophe. The degraded condition of girls and women in Afghanistan, the situation of human rights are among many, many issues that have raised our concern and constantly keeping us all worried and nervous. Today, we do have a great list of panelists that will help us to look into the current situation for women and girls in Afghanistan and identify policy recommendation and the next steps forward. As our first speaker, we have Her Excellency Ambassador Trine Heimerback, who is the Deputy Permanent Representative of Norway to the United Nations. Before coming to New York, Ambassador Heimerback was the Minister and Deputy Permanent Representative of Norway to the United Nations and other international organizations in Geneva. Previously, she has also served in the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs as Policy Director at the Prime Minister's Office in Oslo, Assistant Director General in the Department of Security Policy in the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Senior Advisor at the Secretariat of the Norwegian Foreign Minister. Our second panelist is MP Naheed Farid, who is parliamentarian in exile, chairperson of House Standing Committee for Women Affairs, and currently serving as a fellow at the Afghanistan Policy Lab. She is also an advisory board member of US Afghanistan Democratic Peace and Prosperity Council. In 2010, when Ms. Farid was elected, she was the youngest parliamentarian in Afghanistan and had worked tirelessly to engage the Afghan youth and women in the nation's political processes. Our next panelist is Ms. Storai Tapesh, the founder and the director of Tapesh Foundation. Ms. Tapesh currently serves as a fellow at the Afghanistan Policy Lab. She is a human rights activist with an extensive knowledge and expertise with civil society. She is the former chair and board member of the Afghan Women's Social Protection Organization, member of SIDA, Technical Committee of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Afghanistan, Deputy Director and Senior Program Manager of Afghan Women's Network. And our final speaker of today's panel is Mr. Gran Hiwat, who is a fellow at the Afghanistan Policy Lab. Mr. Hewad is an excellent researcher with more than 2 decades of experience on policy research and communication. He wrote for the Afghanistan Analysis Network, USAIP, and managed the research department of the Afghanistan Research and Evaluation Unit. Its focus has been on socio-political transformation and conflict analysis. He also has covered topics such as international relations, democratic changes, radicalization, political economy, and youth. He had worked in various government agencies, including the Afghanistan Parliament and Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, where he served as a spokesperson and director of communication and public affairs. And of course, now it's my distinguished honor to ask Her Excellency Ambassador Heimerback to deliver her remarks. The floor is yours, Madam Ambassador.
Thank you, and thank you for the introduction, and great to see you again in this capacity, really. And also thank you to the Afghanistan Policy Lab and the United Nations Association of New York for convening this important and very timely discussion today. Because we're quickly approaching, it's hard to believe, the 1-year mark of the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan. And many of the worst fears of the Afghan people are playing out before our eyes right now, particularly for women and girls. The immediate worsening of the humanitarian and economic situation disproportionately affected women and girls. And the recent decisions by the Taliban to ban girls from secondary education, restrict women's freedom of movement and autonomy, and dissolve the institutions dedicated to promoting their rights have had further detrimental impact on Afghanistan's ability to stabilize and recover. So since the Taliban takeover last August, the entire UN system has been clear in their determination to stay and deliver for the Afghan people. And as penholder, as an elected member in the Security Council on the mandate for the UN mission in Afghanistan, UNAMA, Norway has also been steadfast in our approach. The UN and the international community must continue to support the Afghan people, but we must also be willing to engage with the de facto authorities. Otherwise, we lose our most important avenues for influencing the Taliban's decisions and the trajectory of Afghanistan's future. So in March this year, the Security Council, after long negotiations, agreed on a renewed mandate for the UN mission in Afghanistan, designed to respond to the new realities and the new challenges on the ground in Afghanistan. It contained a reinforced mandate to promote gender equality, women's participations, girls' education, and to monitor and report specifically on violations, abuses, and reprisals committed against women. But it also gave UNAMA a clear mandate to engage with all Afghan stakeholders on these issues, and that includes the de facto authorities. But since the adoption of the renewed mandate, the human rights situation in Afghanistan has gone from bad to worse. The hopes of millions of Afghan girls and the expectations of the entire international community were shattered when the Taliban decided in March to ban girls from secondary education, contrary to all previous commitments and promises. The further restrictions imposed on women throughout this spring, including restrictions on movement, employment, expression, and autonomy have further disappointed us tremendously and shocked the international community. And these restrictions seem aimed to exclude women and girls from all aspects of public life. And as penholder in the Security Council, we have hence initiated 2 extraordinary sessions on the Council to discuss these developments. And we have made sure that the Council responds with a united voice. The Council, so all 15 Council members, have clearly called on the Taliban to swiftly reverse their policies. The Security Council has also given the UN mission in Afghanistan a strong mandate to facilitate an inclusive dialogue and promote representative government, which will be key to achieving sustainable peace and stability in Afghanistan, as well as protecting the rights of all Afghans. So we continue to insist that the Taliban keep their promises, the promises they made at the takeover, and they have to keep their promises, especially to the women and girls in Afghanistan, and comply with the country's human rights obligations. The future of Afghanistan will be determined by whether the de facto authorities heed the calls of the international community, and more importantly, the calls of the Afghan people, because you will never have stability and economic development if you exclude 50% of society and don't have human rights for all. I thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador, for your very comprehensive remarks. Now I would like to give the floor to MP Farid. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's my true honor and pleasure to join this distinguished panel. I just want to start with the fact that I appear before you still in a shock that the Taliban have taken over Afghanistan. And this was unpredictable for the people of Afghanistan. Yes, for years, Afghan people, Afghan women have faced atrocities, death threats from the Taliban. I cannot count on how many friends and colleagues I have lost to the Taliban violence in the parliament and their targeted assassination against the human rights defenders. By the Taliban taking power was an unforeseeable, unpleasant truth that happened before our eyes, that we had to leave the country and everything behind, including our constituency, because of the Taliban takeover. And for Afghan women of my generation, we remember the Taliban from the 90s, their sudden takeover of the country that brings back so many of the nightmares that we had at that time. When I was a girl growing in Afghanistan, in Hewad, I loved going to school. I dreamed of one day becoming a doctor. And the Taliban took control of Afghanistan, my city, and they closed my school that time. They burned my school. They most of my time at home with female relatives. And today, the same thing is happening. Today, what we as Afghan women have known all along is clear to the world to see that the Taliban are taking power. They are rolling back all the gains of the past 20 years, and they are reinstitutionalizing their primitive rules. And Afghan women and girls face blatant gender apartheid and a return of the 90s. And the Taliban have stripped most women of the ability to work. Girls cannot attend secondary and high school. Young women who grew up in a free and open society are now living in fear. Ladies and gentlemen, the right to education can't be ignored. It's all over the universal values in non-binding frameworks such as 1990 World Declaration on Education for All, Beijing Platform of Action, the 1994 International Conference on Population and Development, the right to education in Millennium Development Goals, the right to education in other recommendations like CEDAW Committee, all of them conceptualize the significant context that in each community, the equal right to universal education for women and girls is absolute, is unconditional, is non-negotiable. But Afghanistan education system under Taliban has a very different experience. As a country that geopolitically and historically affected by conflict, by civil war, by decades-long insecurity, Afghan women as the most vulnerable group has been affected and suffered the most. According to Global Citizen Poll in October 2021, Afghanistan used to be the worst country in the world to be a woman. You know, in the first day of the Taliban takeover, they ensured that they will resume girls' education. Women can return to their job. There's an inclusive government that has to be established. General amnesty will be given to all. But in few days, they denied all their promises. As of today, it's 263 days that Afghan girls banned from attending secondary and high school. And this decision deteriorated the situation for girls, contributed to the dramatic rise of child and forced marriage in Afghanistan, with the report of selling down an 18-days-old baby girl to marriage in my city. The women's rights in Afghanistan stands as a complete gender apartheid. Taliban restricted all means of freedom of speech, freedom of media. They limit the freedom. They limit reports about atrocities against women and human rights defenders. And unfortunately, they form an all-male, all-Taliban-run government. They resume public execution. They whip, they flog, they do judiciary killing, they force displacement, they do mass detentions, they do ethnic cleansing, banning women from work and education and sport. They crack down on peaceful protesters, if you saw on the news, restricting the freedom of speech and independent media. They assault journalists, they silence the music. This list goes on, and this is what the Taliban have done to my country, and this is what they have been busy doing since taking power in Afghanistan. The situation on the ground, no other country has the same restrictions on women of their country like women of Afghanistan they have today. Taliban latest order force women and girls to cover their faces when in public and avoid being outside if it is not necessary, and the punishment of violating this decree will be inflicted on their male counterparts is an example. The latest move is part of a regular flow of the Taliban actions that have blocked girls from secondary and high school. They pushed women out of most employment. They restricted women's freedom of movement, obstructed women's access to healthcare, and abolished the system that was designed in the parliament and also in other areas to protect women and girls from violence and domestic violence. I would continue because unfortunately the situation is very, very unfortunate for women of Afghanistan, but I would stop here and welcome the question and answer part if there was any question related to my points. Thank you so much.
Thank you, MP Farid, for providing us with a general overview of the situation for women and girls in Afghanistan, which is extremely difficult. Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Tapesh for her opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Rose, for giving us the opportunity. I also would like to recognize and acknowledge my fellow speakers, Ambassador Trine, MP Naheed, and Mr. Gran Hiwat. Today I will be addressing the challenges of the civil society and the way they were working before the collapse. As everybody knows here, the civil society played a very critical role in the fundamental shifts by defending and empowering the Afghans, including women, vulnerable and marginalized groups, the internally displaced people, and also minorities in the last 20 years. The civil society organizations filled the space that was untouched by the Afghan government, including development, national cohesion, the transformative changes, increasing accountability, influencing decision-making, providing policy advice. The civil society also built linkages between the communities, the government, and also international stakeholders in Afghanistan. It also monitored the laws and the frameworks and enhanced the local governance, raised the awareness, and opened the space to people to advocate for their rights. The civil society also developed mechanisms for effectively engaging with the government, with the international actors, in provision of the services and delivery on the ground. Today, the civil society are not only collapsed and restricted by the Taliban, but also due to lack of financial support by the international community, donors, and UN agencies. The international community should not fuel up the conservative policies of the Taliban, but should strengthen the civil society and women-led organization across the country. Since the mid-August 2021, every day we hear rollbacks on women's rights in Afghanistan. Women and girls are living in fear, and women are told not to come to work. The women protection centers were attacked, looted, and women were detained. The Ministry of Women's Affairs has been abolished. The Independent Human Rights Commission, the Afghanistan Independent Election Commission, the Afghanistan Independent Complaint Commission, the Parliament, and the Department of the Political Parties is dissolved by the Ministry of Justice and also by the Taliban government. Women activists are attacked, they are detained, disappeared, and killed, and no one, including the UNAMA, has access to those detention centers. According to the recent reports by the Safety and Risk Mitigation Organization, since 2021, a total of 37 activists and media workers and their family members were attacked. And since the civil society remained the key responders in evolving crisis, and it's important that they could work in enabling environment. However, both the international and national organizations have been encountering different obstacles due to politics outside Afghanistan, and also due to new policies that are imposed by the Taliban government that hampers the program delivery on the ground. The approach of the Taliban towards the civil society and NGOs is totally different at the district level and also at the provincial level. It hugely depends on the individual character of the official that NGOs are seeking to engage with. For example, the NGOs with the experience in coordinating, facilitating, and delivering the humanitarian aid are in a better position to engage with the Taliban and compared to those with the advocacy and human rights mandate. It's because that many senior Taliban officials have only had religious studies and do not have any clue or understanding of the development in humanitarian principles, and thus initiatives that are needed to Taliban officials on key topics such as humanitarian principles, values, and women's rights are needed and also important. The Taliban officials are also interfering in NGOs work, basically in the areas such as leadership, staffing, selection of the beneficiaries, program design, and the coverage. The occurrence of these interferences is again different at the district and provincial levels and also at the central level. For example, on 9th April 2022, the Ministry of Economics released a decree that called the board members, executive directors, also the deputy directors to resume their work in Afghanistan. Those who are in exile could return or should resign. And now the Ministry of Economics is asking the NGOs to have Taliban officials as the board members of the organization, which means they are clearly they want to control the civil society in Afghanistan. Also, according to the NGO law, the NGOs are exempted from the taxation of their activities, but are required to withhold the income tax to the government. The NGOs are facing huge problems due to this because there isn't any clear policies from donor community, also from the UN agencies, whether the civil society should to pay the income taxes or how it could be charged on donor funds that NGOs are receiving. From the other hand, the sanctions impacted the work of the NGOs. And also from the other hand, the Afghanistan economy is so daunting. The country operation could not be run by the traditional banking system, which is called Hawala. And the international community must reach to a consensus to find a practical solution that restores the formal banking and financial system, a high level and constructive engagement of the financial financial institutions such as the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and also the regional banks are so much important to oversee and track the financial systems and respond the massive crisis that Afghanistan is facing with. In terms of media, I just hear like more than 90% of the media channels are not independent. A big part of the broadcasting are financially supported by different intelligence groups and also regimes, while some are operating for the aim of business and income generation. So the medias are unable to reflect the atrocities the Taliban are committing, and they are unable to reflect the actual things happening on the ground in terms of human rights, in terms of civil society, due to the huge censorship of Taliban. So I think I'm done with I just don't want to take more of your time. Otherwise, I have a lot to mention about the civil society and the things that are happening in the ground, but we will discuss it in the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tapesh. Thank you for providing us with an overall overview of the civil society situation in Afghanistan and the challenges they're facing specifically post-August 15. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Hewad to start or share his opening remarks with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador Roz. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's conversation. I found this panel relevant to discuss part of the implications that the collapse of the Islamic Republic had on the Afghan women and their education as an outstanding issue that all Afghans and the international stakeholders have to pay sustainable attention to. My colleagues already pointed out quite a few. However, what I had in mind was the fact that around 1 million girls have been banned from attending secondary school during the last 9 months since the Taliban take over of the power. This number is an add-on to an existential problem for more than 4 million Afghan girls who had no access to education during the past 2 decades due to protracted conflict and the war. Considering this 1 million, the total number of girls who left out of the schools due to lack of access to education under the Taliban regime has gone above 5 million. Initially, reports indicates that the girls affected by this decision of the Taliban have been suffering psychological symptoms. This was widely reported that they had the families and friends of these girls who I knew personally were reporting these symptoms. Reports also indicate that families who see no future for their daughters under the Taliban regime have started taking illegal refuge in the neighboring and regional countries. This trend has reportedly taken so many lives and further fueled the migration crisis in destination countries. The effects these performances leaves on women's fate in Afghanistan are unmeasurable and so painful. It will profoundly affect the already disabled economy, the complicated social coherence, and the global understanding of Afghanistan as a nation state. During the past 2 decades and 4 rounds of parliament work, Afghanistan had during which Afghanistan had a bicameral legislature. At least 100 members along these 4 decades were women. 35% of both lower house and the Senate were represented by women. This was a powerful delegation where women could practice making laws and decisions on a national level and deliver on international commitments of Afghanistan along its history. For the first time in the country's history, the judiciary system had a strong presentation of women judges. Over 200 women judges could manage to get seats in various decision-making levels of the Afghan judicial system. This was a remarkable progress for the rule of law and women's access to justice. With the Taliban excluding women from judiciary, we have an incomplete apparatus in the system to rule the law and critical decrease in women's access to justice. Tens of thousands of women have been cut off from public and private workspace. All the women worked in the private sector as investors, leaders, and managers. Women in government agencies, civil society, and non-governmental sector had a significant part and were a huge part of the social fabric. These layers of society presented the diversity of Afghan society, practicing leadership and winning bread for their families. Afghanistan, which has been in conflict for more than 4 decades, now is one of those countries with the highest number of widows and families led by women without existing of any system or any social system or systemic support. Banning women from the workforce, the Taliban has put the majority of these women and their families in absolute fame and anger. This exclusion has caused the emergence of a workspace fully filled by men with an extreme interpretation of the Islamic norms against women, and resulted in half of the population living without access to essential services and workspace. I am underlying the importance of these points and alarming you all that this will not stop here unless we take concrete steps and support the Afghan women to find their place back in Afghanistan society. We will be dealing with an overwhelming masculine and malfunctioning system in Afghanistan. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Hewad, for your comprehending briefing and description of situation, and as well as helping us to see the figures and compare the progress that women had made in Afghanistan and the challenges that we're seeing, and actually also a forecast of what may happen in the future as well. Thank you. Now I wanted to move to the Q&A session, and I do want to start with Madam Ambassador Heimerback with a question. I think it comes very naturally for a lot of us, considering the very critical role that Norway plays at the United Nations as an elected member of the Security Council, as the pen holder for Afghanistan. How do you evaluate the role of UN agencies and in terms of promoting the rights of Afghan women? And we talk specifically post-August 15, and then as well as working towards, beside elevating, working towards pressuring Taliban or working with them to facilitate access for girls' education. And what would be your recommendations for the UN agencies and UN in general? What could be the next steps forward, because you're in the heart of it?
Thank you very much, and thank you to my co-panelists. It's really interesting and sad to hear from you. But I think for us as pen holder, it was extremely important to immediately, for the entire UN family, to make the decision to stay and deliver. Mm-hmm. I think that was the most important immediate decision that was made. And even though we strongly disagree with the Taliban's decision, I believe, and Norway believes, that it's vital that the international community continues to pursue a dialogue when the Taliban is now the de facto authorities. In order to help the Afghan people, we need to be in dialogue with them. And I think for the humanitarian access, this was helpful. But on the right side, definitely not. And we have to be very clear in our demands and expectations. But if there is no dialogue, there is no opportunity to influence them right now. So I think we will continue to make our case that respect for the rule of law and human rights and even a more inclusive government is necessary for not only for sustainable peace in Afghanistan, but also for national and international legitimacy and recognition. And we know that the Taliban, that is also what they want. And we need to be very clear of what is expected if you want to be part of the international community. If you want to be part of the global economic financial system, there are certain things that are required. So I think for the UN to continue, we will continue that dialogue. But really, I must say that we negotiated quite a robust mandate for UNAMA. So for us now, it's really to support the UN in implementing the mandate. I don't think we need to add anything. If we will be able to implement what we have, we already have come, quite far. But on the right sides, we see that there are complications, and also we will continue with our partners in the Security Council to see if we will be able to speak with an even stronger voice from the Security Council. But we also believe that it's important to stay united behind our demands to the de facto authorities. So there is for us, a challenge to find the right balance between the stronger voice, but to stay united.
Thank you. I absolutely do relate to what you said, having a stronger voice and united. That's could be a challenging some of the work at the UN, and especially at the Council. My next question is to MP Farid. I do know you are in contact with your constituents. You do hear from them. You listen to them. Truly, what do you hear from them at this time? And if it was to us here right now in the US and in the international community, what would you like us to have some of those messages and what needs to be done from our end to help those who are inside in the country?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a very important question. I highlighted some of the issues that I heard from my constituency. In general, the Taliban overthrew a democratically elected government, took a nation of 40 million people hostage, all men and women and minorities, and people all around the country are not happy with what's going on in terms of governance in Afghanistan. And Taliban has minimal capacity of governance. Very few of the technocrats remain in Afghanistan. We saw an unprecedented brain drain in the history of Afghanistan. There is a very serious breakdown in basic services such as healthcare and education, banking and finance, aviation, and I can name on and on. So all these realities on the ground take us to the result that the Taliban, beside of not having the cohesion to provide the basic needs to the people, they don't have the capacity as well to provide the basic needs to the people of Afghanistan. This brings us to the second part of the question you highlighted, Ambassador Ross, that we have to acknowledge at least 5 facts in order to move forward. What's happening right now in Afghanistan is the most serious women's rights crisis in the world. The international community cannot turn a blind eye on women of Afghanistan at this very vital, important time. 2, despite ongoing economic and humanitarian crisis that my constituency and the people of Afghanistan are experiencing, the Taliban are focused on tightening the social restrictions, curbing civil liberties and rolling back the gains of the last 20 years, things like that. Taliban are not focusing on the actual governance that they have to do. The third thing is that the Taliban are not capable of change and reform because they have been designed to be a group good for fighting, a group that is good for terror, not a group that is good for governance. That's why they only became more repressive. They became more authoritarian. For the Taliban repressive internal rules and also the confrontational external policies that they are having, paving a way for an all-out civil war in Afghanistan, because we are seeing the signs of it right now from all over the country with all the resistance and disagreement with the Taliban. And the fifth thing is that there are no major overlapping interests between regional states to work with Taliban, to deal with the Taliban. The Taliban are pursuing bad and aggressive policies towards almost all of them in the region. So what's the way forward? I think there are so many ways that can help the people of Afghanistan, the women of Afghanistan, the girls' education. There are a lot of conditionalities that can be put on Taliban to pressurize them. UN Security Council met, discussed Taliban decree a few days ago. They had the closed door conversation. They had the statements. They had condemnation. These are not enough. We need urgent actions that has to be taken to help the women of Afghanistan. The UN new SRSG must have a track record on women, peace and security and human rights. He must have tangible achievements in this mentioned issue. It's also a strong commitment in the forwarding of women, peace and security and human rights agenda through regular monitoring, reporting, documentation, authentication of the situation on the ground. We also, through Afghanistan Policy Lab, have some other recommendations like to UN Security Council, to CEDAW committee. They have to issue a standalone resolution on the status of women and girls in Afghanistan. This is the time that women's status stay at the top of the agendas of the world because women of Afghanistan are suffering a lot. And US also can be helpful. US can continue to play a strong role, a constructive role on helping civil society of Afghanistan, of building a global coalition of allies to prevent Taliban atrocities that can help Afghan people creating the type of government they want and they deserve, because the people of Afghanistan do not deserve what is going on in Afghanistan right now.
Thank you. Thank you. I know it's not easy for you to talk about all that, but it's extremely important that we do discuss, in addition to the challenges, what could be the next steps to help out what we are all seeing and facing inside Afghanistan, inside the country. And so thanks. My next question is to Ms. Tapesh. I do know you have an extensive experience with the civil society. You're also engaged in contacts with them even right now. And you were also among the people who were extremely active in the last 20 years to do much of the work that was need to be done among the civil society organizations. How do you see the limiting space that they're in right now, or could be non-existential space even in the future? How do you foresee the future for them? And again, I think it probably similar question, what needs to be done? What type of help needs to be provided to them? Are there specific proposals and solutions you can propose or you have for the audience and for all of us?
Well, thank you so much. That's a very valid and relevant question at the moment. As most of the international organizations pulled out the country, and we do not hear more about our stories in the international media and also from the international community, as the focus is shift to war in Ukraine. Afghanistan will be forgetting soon, and that's like our fear as civil society activists. So that's like everybody is talking about that. I think women are much more organized than other political and social groups. So they should to be given the chance and also secure platforms to raise their voices on women's issues and also on broader country issues. My recommendations could be for the international community that the existing structures, for instance, the civil society, women-led organizations, and the network should be preserved, strengthened, and used as an opportunity to operate in Afghanistan. The civil society organization must be involved and consulted on regular basis for any development or humanitarian programs. Such initiatives should enable the civil society organizations to access to direct funds, implementation, and also oversight. The ongoing efforts should establish constructive platforms that enables the civil society to directly and civilly address the de facto authorities on their concerns and proposals on inclusive governance, fundamental human rights, freedom, security, and the realization of full and equal participation in social, economic, and political life of the country. The UN agencies and the wider international community and all stakeholders who are involved in Afghanistan or who were involved in Afghanistan before should prioritize the civil society engagement, especially women-led organizations, including women, youth, minorities, and diverse groups in any deal or a dialogue with the de facto authorities. The development programs, humanitarian assistance from its initial stages to planning, implementation, and impact level. The UN and the international community must adapt mechanisms and schemes to allow conditional development fund flow to Afghanistan and engage the Afghan civil society on sanction-related discussions so that the recommendation could be targeted to lift or exempt restrictions on funding flows on aid groups and local NGOs operating in Afghanistan. We also don't want the international community to find our battle. We just want them to create us a safe space for us and also for the civil society and enhance their access to large-scale funds, civil society representation, and their equal access to all opportunities and resources could ensure and engage women and girls to benefit the aids and contribute to the community and effectively. The civil society and the UN access to the civil society organizations is so much important, and we want the UN agencies and also the civil society and also the international community to have effective coordination and consultation with the civil society organizations in Afghanistan. The local organizations had been very active until 15th of August 2021, but they were doing local relief work and also community-led initiatives and also the project. This was supported by the flexible grants from the embassies, especially in women's rights areas. Currently, more than 70% of these small organizations are being collapsed or they are in a crisis and they are unable to deliver their work on the ground. So the international community could engage and provide more flexible grants for such organization as a short-term solution to deliver in remote settings. So that could be the recommendations. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Tapesh, for this very constructive and well thought and very clear recommendations in regards to how to strengthen and support the Afghan civil society. We do know that it may seem a very idealistic request or thought or thinking, but this is the strength and the pillar of the new Afghanistan that we have always talked about it and how critical it is to protect and preserve. My next question is to Mr. Hewad, and then I'm going to collect the questions from the audience, and we have a few questions right now in front of me. Mr. Hewad, knowing your experience in the foreign policy and the foreign services, and based on that, how do you think the recent decision and decrees made by Taliban in regards to women and girls in Afghanistan would impact their ambition for recognition?
Thank you, Ambassador. I think one thing that Ambassador Heimerback also underlined was the prerequisites for the Taliban performances, if they would like to be, or if there would be any intention to be part of the international community, was concrete consideration of the human rights, women's rights, and rule of law, and the establishment of an inclusive government. Hearing this from an elected representative or an elected member of the UN Security Council is quite energizing and recalling. I think that on international level, this is that what Taliban has committed and mentioned it in many platforms, including the agreements that they have made and the promises that they have made before taking over of the power. On a national level, I think that the steam that the people of Afghanistan could show off, and what the people of Afghanistan had accumulated and preserved during the last 20 years were quite obvious with the demonstrations and the gatherings that the Afghan women had organized during the past 9 months. They faced an extreme oppression by the Taliban. They were detained extrajudicially, and they were faced severe treatment by the Taliban, including torture. But what they presented and the picture that the women of Afghanistan depicted during the last 9 months against the restrictions that the Taliban were imposing were huge. It was remarkable. It puts us toward a question that what if we leave the people of Afghanistan to stand on their own against the restrictions that the territorial that a dictatorship and a regime like the Taliban can impose on them. It's obvious that the economic situation and the situation that the people of Afghanistan are going through need international support and international attention. However, the picture that the people and the women of Afghanistan depicted were quite charming, I would say, and this made one hopeful that the people of Afghanistan has so much to say, and then this make the life of a dictator so hard to get legitimacy from them. So I would call us to remind us this, and give the credit to the women of Afghanistan in this struggle for freedom and survival, and tell the Taliban that getting legitimacy from the people of Afghanistan is hard for dictators like you. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Grant, for elaborating on this important question, because I think it is a critical question that so many of us have, and everybody is trying to find the right answer and what Taliban truly needs to do in order to get which you said on their path if they wish to be recognized by the international community. We have received questions from the audience, and I'm going to start with a question from Trisha, and I think this probably would be related to you, Mr. Hewad, and Madam Ambassador, to you, and I'm going to twist it a little bit towards Madam Ambassador to make it a little bit more specific. The question says, to what extent do we have reliable current data indicating the demographic distribution of support or opposition to the Taliban regime? So I think, Gran, if you could highlight that, and also, and related what's perhaps anticipated in terms of internally organized violent opposition to the regime. And to Madam Ambassador, I think if I reform the question in a specific way towards your role and Norway's role and the role of the UN, do we have specific figures that indicates, as of now, of course, the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Afghanistan, its impact on women specifically, because we do know that half of the population are women, and what exactly it means to them. There was a large number of them who were working and now they are unemployed. What type of leverage you think still exists with the United Nations and UN colleagues that they could tap on to pressure Taliban on their policies towards a woman? Because there is the logical side for all of us. We think even economically it won't be as sustainable if a country, half of its population is not actively engaged, being as an economic contributors to the society. So I'm going to leave these questions to you, Madam Ambassador, and to Mr. Hewad, and Ms. Naheed and Mr. Tapesh. I will read the other question, which said, how is the forced marriage conducted? I can also add, has there been more or recent information that the situation is deteriorated for women and young girls in Afghanistan post-August 15? If yes, you could elaborate further, and Mr. Tapesh, you also feel free to add on. So I leave it first to you, Madam Ambassador, take the floor, and then Mr. Hewad, you. You're muted.
Thank you for the question. I must admit there are figures. I must admit I don't have them where I'm right now, but there are good figures, and we hope also that that when we get the new report from UNAMA in accordance with the new mandate, we will get the next quarterly report in June. We will also have updated figures on many relevant things. So I would just encourage you to look for that report when it comes out in June. But what we know is that, you know, Afghanistan is under the threat of famine. There is drought. There are many challenges, also because of the consequences of the war in Ukraine. Fuel prices and food prices in general globally have increased, which will also impact third parties around the globe, which is so unfortunate. But we made sure when we had the sanctions renewed in December, that there are humanitarian carve-outs in the sanctions. We also know that most big donors, like Norway, we're strongly committed to keeping the level of humanitarian aid going. Our support goes to humanitarian assistance as well as basic service delivery, food security, and livelihoods. And it goes directly through mechanisms circumventing the de facto authorities. And I think that's also important to mention. And it's important that we for now, do it that way to put pressure on the de facto authorities. As I said, if they want to be recognized, if they want to be negotiated with on these very important issues for the Afghan population, first of all, they need to include the entire population when they look at rights. And secondly, if they want our recognition, there are certain changes that needs to be done. They have to do what they promise. They have to walk the talk. We cannot see that the promises they made to us. They also came to Oslo and made some promises on how they would treat women and girls, and we don't see that happening. So for now, we will circumvent the de facto authorities with our humanitarian aid, but we will continue the level of aid in order to reach the people. Another important thing is that we need all the women humanitarian workers to be able to deliver aid. And we demand that the women humanitarian workers do not need to be accompanied by a man in order to work and secure humanitarian access and for food and necessities to be delivered to the people.
Thank you. Thank you. That's extremely helpful. Mr. Hewad.
Thank you, Ambassador. I would say that since the takeover of the Taliban, we have observed an extreme level of oppression of the free media in Afghanistan. Many things are happening on the ground which are not actually being covered, including the accountability and the transparency that we are expecting on distribution of the humanitarian assistance. Honestly speaking, there is nothing else on the ground, and no document, no charter, no nothing to make the Taliban accountable to the people of Afghanistan or to the international community. That put us in a vacuum of strategic engagement with the Taliban as a de facto authority. There are reports from my own sources that I'm in contact with regarding the distribution of the humanitarian assistance, which is reporting maldistribution of the humanitarian assistance on the ground. They are forcing the distributors to conduct the way they expect on specific circumstances, and that affects the overall aim of the international community and the aim of the civic and humanitarian assistance, which is equality and just promotion and distribution of the aid. On the resistance and the violence that is being performed by the opposition forces, that is not covered by media. That is something that the Taliban are extremely sensitive about to be reported by the media, and the access to on the ground is quite limited for the international observers to report, which can be extremely critical for understanding of the situation in Afghanistan. The Taliban have been promoting various topics to the media, which they knew that are so catchy for the media entities and international observers. But still, we need more to know about what exactly is going on the ground. They are censoring anything. They're censoring any report that can affect their reputation and their image on international level.
Thank you so much. And MP Farid and Ms. Tapesh, we're going a little over the time, so if we can shorten the answer, would be highly appreciated.
Yeah, I will be very, very short. I want to echo what Mr. Gran highlighted, that we are in a situation that there is a limited media report on the issues on the ground. There is extremely serious operations by the Taliban on any reports that is about their activities. But still, we have protesters. Still, we have resistance. Still, we have people who are against and raise their voice against the Taliban. And with this situation, that at the same time that we don't have the media and free media, and we see all this operation, there is no independent body to highlight the realities on the ground, to highlight the human rights and women's rights situation on the ground. With all this unfortunate happenings on the ground, we still have our ties with the people, with the staff, with the constituency, with the protesters, with the people who are elders in the community, to navigate what's going on the ground. And yes, child marriage is in the rise, forced marriage is in the rise. We have reports. Those reports are really making us very sad about the realities. And there are ways that we can put Taliban accountable. Afghanistan is in the midst of a massive humanitarian and hunger crisis. We all know that Taliban need financial assistance. We all know Taliban need sanctions reliefs. We know that Taliban have to find out ways to deliver to the people and to address those humanitarian challenges. And they want diplomatic recognition. So the US, UN, international players and other concerned partners should leverage their financial assistance to pressurize Taliban, to push the Taliban to respect women's rights, to push the Taliban to respect the societal values of people of Afghanistan. It's the least that they can do for the brave Afghan women, for brave Afghan people who continue to stand up against the Taliban and their repression.
Thank you, Ms. Farid. I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Tapesh, but before doing that, I do see Madam Ambassador has her hands and would like to raise a question or.
No, just sorry to take the floor again. I just feel the urge to say, as a diplomat, but also as a European, that we know that the war in Ukraine is taking a lot of our attention, and it's a well-documented. It's a lot of press inside Ukraine that can document and report from Ukraine. So I just wanted to say that we want as much information coming out of Afghanistan as possible. And we are committed also now as a penholder in the Security Council to stay true to the cause and to the job that we have. And we will never lose sight of the job that we have, even though there are new conflicts coming. Our commitment is to stay true to this cause, and we will not forget our sisters and daughters in Afghanistan.
Thank you. Let me thank on behalf of the Afghan participants today and the panelists. And of course, I think for those who are all engaged on Afghanistan, for practitioners and policymakers, that the cause and the call of Afghan people to be alive and kept to the heart of so many that have been engaged, including European colleagues, I think it's extremely important. So thank you for this acknowledgement and this message you shared today. I'm going to go back to Ms. Tapesh, your final words, and then I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Hewad to conclude today's very interesting panel conversation and discussion on a difficult topic, girls' education and women's situation in Afghanistan. It's going to be a very hard job for Mr. Hewad, but at my end, I would like to express my gratitude to the distinguished panelists, to Madam Ambassador, to you, to my previous colleague, and to you as well for facilitating and being an excellent partner to co-host and co-organize today's event. So I'm going to give it to Ms. Tapesh and then to Mr. Hewad.
Well, thank you so much. I echo whatever my colleagues already raised about the forced marriage. I just want to mention 2 points. According to the civil Afghanistan civil law, marrying a girl under age of 18 is illegal. Also, Taliban issued a decree in the late December 2021 and barring forced marriage. But still, the data that we have and we collected from the ground and we hear from our friends, the child marriage is still on rise. It is due to multiple reasons, which includes the independency, because most of the girls are dependent. They are not allowed to go to education. The poverty, the humanitarian crisis are on rise. So there are multiple issues that cause the forced marriage in Afghanistan. So I think we will need a separate session to discuss on that, because it's huge. It's huge. So we won't be able to cover the whole thing in a very short time. So the final words that I can say from my side is on rise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Fish. Mr. Grant, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much, Ambassador Ross. Thank you so much, Ambassador Trine Heimerback, for your time and availability for today's event. Let me also express my gratitude to the UN Association of New York, its Honorable Executive Director, Ms. Ann Nicol, and all the participants and distinguished panelists from the Afghanistan Policy Lab who enriched today's conversation with their precious thoughts and ideas. As all distinguished panelists underlined, the Afghan women and girls are in their worst socio-political conditions of the 21st century. The situation that the Afghan women and girls are going require a sustainable and very sympathetic attention so that they could get out of these circumstances. Underlying the Taliban malperformances, under delivery of their promises, and lack of capability to work with the people of Afghanistan and the international community had been highlighted by all participants for delivering their promises, and the very basic pattern of the international engagement with Afghanistan people, especially on distribution of the humanitarian assistance, which is critical in times of the food crisis, the drought, and the high rates of inflation due to the crisis of the Ukraine, which has affected the global food market. The unfaithfulness of the Taliban with the people of Afghanistan regarding the promises they made about the basic rights, human rights, and the freedoms of the people of Afghanistan had been key concerns of the distinguished panelists that need to be consistently followed up so that we can pursue the Taliban to commit their promises. The exclusion of 50% of the population, which are mainly educated women, civil society leaders, women politicians, and women activists, women rights activists, cannot bring just undermine the peace and stability in Afghanistan. So we all call on the Taliban to respect the rights of the women, the human rights of women, the rights of women and girls to education, and to work so that we guarantee the economic and social prosperity of the people of Afghanistan. The women of Afghanistan are facing a categoric gender apartheid by the de facto authorities. This is what we all call on the Taliban to stop on immediate basis and make themselves available for provision and enabling a space for women to find their selves and their position as an active member of society. Civil society's role is critical, has been critical during the past 20 years for transparency, for accountability, for making the rights of the people of Afghanistan a must for the government and international stakeholders. And what they did so profoundly was bridging between the people of Afghanistan and the government officials across the country, enabling them and providing an enabling space for them could be crucial for having and pursuing the transparency in the government performances. The oppression of the freedom of expression and the lack of free reporting of the situation on the ground was a repeated matter of concern for all the panelists. We call on all the stakeholders who are engaged in this in dialogue with the Taliban to keep this topic high in the agenda and consistently push for resumption of freedom of speech and letting the Afghan media entities, which was one of the major achievements of the past 20 years, to work on a free environment. On the recommendations part, I just want to highlight a few that I could note down. It was the call by UN Security Council, the resolutions that the UN Security Council had passed in various events, that the Taliban must respect the rule of law, human rights, and freedom of expression, and making an inclusive government. These and a list of international values that we all are committed to, them are the key prerequisites for the Taliban to consider in their performances to be part of the international community, or to be understood by the international community as an active member. We call on the United Nations, as the Ambassador Heimerback highlighted, to stay united and keep a strong voice in support of the people of Afghanistan. Once again, we call on all the stakeholders to keep the freedom of speech in Afghanistan a top point in their talking points during their engagement and dialogue with the Taliban and in their public engagements. preservation of civil society organizations, coordination with them by the UN agencies, and prioritizing supporting civil society organizations, especially those who are working for women's rights and education of girls, is a request that we are making and a call that we are making on all UN agencies and other international organizations that are operating on the ground in Afghanistan. Promotion and coordination of the efforts between the international stakeholders can be one of those patterns and one of those lessons that we learned from the past 2 decades that can be at the best of interest of the people of Afghanistan. And last but not the least, we hope that the magic of multilateralism may manifest itself along the process and make itself prevalent in a way to end the conflict in Afghanistan in a near future. I wish you all the very best, and I hope that I could be able to cover the points that was raised by the panelists, and then the questions raised. And I now pass it on to Anne to wrap it up. Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gran. And Ambassador Raz, thank you for moderating this really important and really informative event on the plight of women and girls in Afghanistan. They will not be forgotten. And thank you to our distinguished panelists for joining us this evening and giving us such a thought-provoking program. And I'd like to thank all our members for joining us for our annual general meeting. And I hope to be able to host you in the coming year with our programs and presentations and meetings. So those of you who are not members and would like to join us, you can find us on our website, UNA-NYC.org, and you can join us there. So everyone have a wonderful evening, and thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you.